Yesterday, I spent the day with a great group of people, and one person came up to me at the break and asked a very good question. We had been talking about the importance of acting out of a state of inspiration rather than a state of fear, and how to do that. And he came up and he said to me, where does courage fit in? Because he said, my understanding of courage is doing what you need to do despite the fear. So it's not the absence of fear, but it is taking the action despite the fear. And this really got me thinking, because, and I said to him, just let me take some time to think about it, because I want to really reflect on this rather than give a quick answer. So I went and I had a look at what is the original meaning of the word courage. Where does the word courage come from? And it comes from the Latin word cor, which literally means heart. So if I just pause there for a second and say, let's look at fear. What is fear? Well, fear is an emotion, and there's a difference between an emotion and our feelings. Remember that feelings are sensations in the body, and emotion is when the mind gets involved and tells a story about the feelings. So we're feeling certain things in the body, and then the mind starts getting involved and painting all sorts of fear-based stories. So that's emotion. Now, if we go back to the original meaning of the word courage, cor, which is heart, and that led into courage literally meaning acting from the heart. Being authentic, being true to who you are, and vulnerable, despite what that might feel like. Okay, so courage is the willingness to open your heart and act from a place of authenticity, even when the mind is telling all these scary stories. So let's look at the energy system in the body. The body has an energy system. This is not some esoteric thing. This is scientifically validated. Everything in our universe is energy at its basic level, basic essence. And we have energy that flows. The feelings in our body, when we feel those feelings, what we're feeling is energy moving in the body. And we have different energy centers in the body. You can think of these energy centers as data points. And the heart is one of those. So when we talk about open your heart, we're not talking about physically opening your heart. Right? We're not talking about your physical heart. We're talking about the energy center of your heart. And it's interesting to note that scientists have now found very complex neurons that previously were only found deep in the brain. They've found these same complex neurons in the heart and in the gut. And as such, we are starting to talk about not intelligence as being something that sits in the head intelligence, but now starting to talk about head intelligence, heart intelligence, gut intelligence. That's why we say things like, follow your heart, right? What does that mean? Well, there's a very strong correlation between heart and passion, heart and enthusiasm. And so follow your enthusiasm. That's where, and remember, enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, which means the God within. There's a divine energy, there's a divine presence there. We talk about, my gut says this. I've got a gut feel about it. So these are real intelligence centers in the body, energy centers. Now, what happens when the mind starts telling fear-based stories And we buy into that, all right? Remember, the moment the mind starts telling a story about what we're feeling, that is what creates emotion. Fear is an emotion. And when we get hooked into the stories that the mind tells us, we close our heart. We stop the energy flowing. Emotion, all right? The original word of emotion, the original meaning of the word emotion actually means to move out. But the way I describe emotion is it's the story we add to the feelings. And when we add a story, we block the energy from moving. So what is courage? Courage is that even when the mind is telling fear-based stories, we bring our attention back to the feelings in the body, and we notice the feelings without judgment. We are not, you see, the heart, metaphorically, is associated with compassion and kindness and love. And when we are in a place of self-judgment, I shouldn't be feeling like this, even. All right, we are closing the heart. And so courage is, can you stay open? Can you stay in a state of love? Can you stay in a state of openness? Can you stay in a state of enthusiasm and passion, even when the mind is telling fear-based stories? So I really believe after this reflection that courage is about acting a certain way despite the fear. But when we say acting a certain way, let's be specific. True courage is the willingness to be open, vulnerable, and authentic. To be true to yourself, which means we're not acting out of the ego. We are not responding to the fear-based stories the mind is telling us. And when the mind starts telling these stories, we can go, okay, it's the mind. It's the mind. That's what the mind does. The mind tells these stories, but I'm going to take my attention away from the story, and I'm going to put my attention on the heart, and I'm going to open my heart, and I'm going to be authentic. I'm going to fearlessly be true to myself, despite the fact that the mind is telling these really scary stories. I'm going to keep my heart open, which means that the energy keeps flowing and we stay connected to the source of everything. You might call that the universe, you might call it consciousness, you might call it universal energy, you might call it God, you might call it the divine. But when our energy system is open, that divine energy and inspiration can flow through us. And that's really, upon reflection, my understanding of how courage fits in with this.